So this is actually it's like a part two, but it's two parts because I remember we did a birthday bash last year.
We did, yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is the birthday bash part two, but then it's
Yeah.
also part
Yeah.
two, getting your popcorn ready from
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah.
Where last week we were virtually on Zoom, and then we were trying to do this right now through that. It didn't work out, so no free ads. But shout out Substack. Anyways, so we're doing this right now. So it's a two-parter basically.
You know it.
So we've got a couple of things we want to hit for sure, and we'll save the best for last. We'll edge it, kind of build up the suspense, the one that you brought up last week, which we'll leave no further introduction for that. But I'm gonna leave it to my mind. We're gonna start off. We'll build into that at the end.
Yeah.
But for now, I know there are a couple of things we want to start on. We've actually got Cleveland and Toronto on in the background right now. It's 56 to 50, 58 to 53. 2.5 minutes left in the third quarter. Cleveland's beating Toronto in a big game 4 and over there. And I know you had a couple thoughts about the NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of set the stage for you and kind of see where you want to take things. You don't have to start with this game. Just bring it up as context for where we're at. But I'm gonna leave the floor to you, man. Last time we talked basketball, it was the play-in.
Yeah.
With the Warriors. Now a couple games into the playoffs.
Well, first we got Commissioner Silver in the house at Scotiabank Arena, and this is an ultimate defensive battle, which I'm sure he doesn't like. He likes it to be raining threes and offense, and
Oh man, that's actually an interesting conversation. We could talk about that. But anyway, so he's not a fan, you don't think?
No, he's definitely not liking this. 58-53, 146 left in the third. Just an ultimate defensive battle. It's like, it's the 80s, 90s era of just a slugfest, proper slugfest. Chippy game for sure. But playoffs. So on Wednesday, I was in Oklahoma for a work trip. Don't ask me as to why they chose Oklahoma. They did my duty, had to show up. Got out of there Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, and made it back in one piece, thankfully. But I was able to squeeze something in, and I went to the game Wednesday night, Game 2, Thunder Suns, and you know what? For a Wednesday night, dude, I know it's the playoffs, but still, for a Wednesday night, every seat was filled. And in terms of environment for a playoff game, that is up there for one of the most fun environments that I've been in. And obviously that was the game where Devin Booker got a pretty interesting tech. He got shoved a little bit by Jalen Williams, not the Jalen Williams that has a hamstring strain, the other one, the reserve player, and he just flipped the ball back on the court, and I think it hit Jalen Williams himself, and then you saw Caruso doing the tech sign right there to the ref, and they reviewed it for whatever reason why they had to review it, and they gave Devin Booker a tech, and that was odd, man. That was very, very odd. And then Devin Booker went off on the officiating crew after that, specifically called out one of the guys. I think his name was James Mitchell or something. I don't know if he got a fine for that. I'm pretty sure he did. But
I think it was 35,000.
Okay,
I could be wrong.
Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, he did have to pay up, but hey, maybe message across. But so that was cool. I mean, but that's a series where, and like I said last week, even if the Warriors did go through, maybe they win one game because of, a vintage Steph performance. It wasn't like they were going to beat Oklahoma City, for God's sake. And just yesterday they had Game 3. SGA had 42 points, only missed 3 shots. Talk about efficiency and everything. And I think it's pretty interesting that, the narrative around OKC is they just get, those cheap calls, SGA, free throw merchant. I'm in on those memes, no doubt. I mess around about that as well. But I think the reason why it's getting a lot more attention is because of how good they are. And obviously they won last year. They're going to probably repeat this year. And remember back in, James Harden's days in Houston, and he was getting to the line a lot. Everybody was like, wow, like, this is a talk about a proper slasher, getting to the hoop, getting those fouls, like that's, a lot of people praised him for it. And right now with SGA, he's doing the same thing pretty much, with a filthy mid range, of course. And everybody criticizes him, and they talk about his numbers are inflated because he gets cheap calls and goes to the line. So uh, again, the only reason why I think the narrative is different there is because the Thunder are just insane, and they're probably going to repeat. So definitely something to talk about for another day. But other series, that's noteworthy. Obviously, I mean they're all noteworthy in their aspect, but the top two on the top of my mind is Minnesota, Denver, 3-1 lead for Minnesota. That series could have gone either way. I don't think anybody would tell you that it'd be 3-1 in Minnesota's favor. DiVincenzo, torn Achilles, and going to be out multiple weeks. And that leaves the question, can Denver, come back here? Can they force a game 7? I mean, their depth, Minnesota's depth is going to be tested. They're going to need Nas Reed to be, to score a heck of a lot of points. And obviously, Dosanmu had a career game, bro. I mean, that was insane. I remember his days not only in Illinois, playing in the tournament, but also in Chicago. And your favorite franchise, the Bulls. I don't know if that's young player. They just don't know how to develop talent or anything, but that's pretty significant for sure. He's finally getting some proper run, and he killed it, bro. He had all 5 of his threes and was getting to the hoop and was doing all that. And that's a great rivalry, man. Even from 2 years ago when they knocked the defending champs at the time in 7, and Jaden McDaniels tried to do an alley-oop to himself when the game was over, and I forgot who on Denver just rejected it and was like, no, we're not having this. And then he had a layup when the game was pretty much done and dusted, and Jokic approached him, and there was a bit of a scuffle at the end there. And but that's what I like about that's when the NBA is at its peak, when it's not buddy right, like these guys dapping each other up after games and stuff, like y'all competing for a championship, act like it. I'm not saying come to punches here or blows, but it's just the rivalry and the intensity that you feel. So I've been loving that series a lot. I haven't watched a whole lot of Magic Pistons, but I'm just reading that the Pistons need another scorer for Cade, because when the game is slowed to a half-court pace compared to the regular season, they're not able to. I mean, they're just not. I mean, they're down 2-1, and they got Game 4 in Orlando. If the Magic pull off that upset, that would be pretty crazy, because the Magic were pretty much underachieving throughout the regular season, bringing in Desmond Bane, and they were supposed to be that team. And they choked out of that a secured playoff game, a playoff series. They had to go in the play-in and get that 8 seed. And I mean, they're 2 wins away from upsetting the 1 seed. And what an indictment on the Pistons if they do lose it. Even if Detroit goes through, it's not looking good for them. So that's all. We'll see what happens there. And that's pretty much it playoffs wise for me. Is there anything that jumps out to you, so far in the first round?
That's a good question. I mean, piggybacking off of what you said about the Denver series, against Minnesota, I think. I mean, you mentioned Ayo Dosunmu with the 42 points last night, and I mean, I think a lot of people maybe who maybe aren't as tuned into it, or like maybe like I think the way that the sport is covered, like if you don't watch it intently, you probably would be like, how the hell did this guy score 42 points? But like, not like he's some, like you mentioned, not some scrub. And he was an All-American guy in college. Like, he had some pretty good performances for the Bulls. I know it kind of gets lost in translation because those Bulls teams are pretty mediocre when he was there. But it's not like he's not a good player. And there's a reason why Minnesota gave up a guy they took in the top 10, a really good young player who wasn't playing at all, and like 4 second-round picks for this guy.
Who did they give up? Was it Dillingham?
Dillingham,
Oh, okay.
Leonard Miller, and I
Okay,
think
okay.
like 4 second-round picks.
Okay.
And that's a separate conversation about the Bulls. We'll save that for
Yeah,
another day.
yeah.
But like, so he's a good player. And Jaden McDaniels, you mentioned him like after game 2, and he basically, you mentioned Dylan Booker called out the referee by name. Jaden McDaniels called out the Nuggets
Yeah,
basically
defenders.
like player one by one. It's like
Yeah,
this guy
yeah.
can't go,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
guy can't defend, this guy
Yeah.
can't defend. And one of two things can happen after someone makes a comment like that. Either someone says something like that and the team that player is on backs it up, or the other team takes that personally and
Mhm.
steps it up. And in the 2 games since he said that, Minnesota won both of those games.
Yeah.
And I think they're good enough to win one of those remaining games, even without Anthony Edwards and DiVincenzo. Obviously, sucks that they both got hurt, especially DiVincenzo with the Achilles. Denver definitely can come back, and yeah, I mean, I think they'll definitely win Game 5.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I think it just comes down to whoever wins Game 6 will win the series. But yeah, it's like you mentioned, it's great competitive basketball. They definitely, it's not buddy. I mean, I don't, you can use the word rivalry, whatever you want to call it, but there's definitely some animosity there, and they don't like each other, which I think is great.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned this game that we're watching, like Cleveland and Toronto. I know you mentioned Adam Silver probably doesn't like this. I think in many ways they kind of maybe they do. I think the way you always hear like
What
the
a
playoffs are
terrible
different.
pass.
The playoffs are a different game, right? It's a
Yeah.
different beast.
Yeah.
And the game slows down. You can muck it up a little bit more. It's more tactical because it's a 7-game series and it's not just a one-off regular season game. And you're playing the same team over and over again. So yeah, and like you said, you're playing for a championship. So I like the fact that, honestly, I think every series in its own right has been really interesting. You mentioned Detroit, and actually, I want to say one thing about Denver and Minnesota real quick. I think the way that basketball is covered is very bizarre in many ways, like on a national level. And so some of the things that I kind of like would want to talk about, maybe that I don't know if it gets talked about in other places or not, but I think a lot of people will make this about Denver. And I think it should be less about Denver and more about Minnesota. Like that series is a pure coin flip.
Yeah.
It's not like Denver's out here choking or anything like that.
It's Chris Finch being a great coach.
Rudy Gobert's playing arguably the best defense of his entire career right now. You can tell he's clearly playing with a chip on his shoulder. Mental. Sometimes with athletes, you have to kind of create your own mental narrative and mental edge a little bit. And I think Rudy's kind of using like some made up, defensive play of the year thing, like him not, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? But, I guess, he's mad or whatever. He wasn't in the top 3 at least. And, he's really playing some, I think Rudy's always been an underrated player too. I think he's always gotten a lot of hate. And I think Rudy Gobert is a big reason why they have so much success. Minnesota, I think he's a really big key for what they do. I know he's not the most popular guy for whatever reason, or maybe for certain reasons, but just as far as a pure basketball sense, the things he can do defensively and even offensively without really, it's not like they're calling plays for Rudy, but just what he's able to do as far as like setting screens and creating space for everybody else to kind of maneuver and operate. I think kind of goes beyond the box score in many ways. And they got a lot of good players. Jaden McDaniels, we mentioned, like Julius Randle's no slouch. Like, he's a really good player. So I think a lot of people will make it about Denver. And then, one thing on the Denver side too, I think a lot of people kind of forget that this time last year, they fired Mike Malone, like, what was it, like a couple weeks before the playoffs. And I think we just kind of forget that. And I think, the media in many ways just kind of not talked about that enough. And then them putting in David Adelman, promoting him, and then keeping him. And, this is really the first playoff series that he's, had a full year to coach in. And I think the early returns on that are interesting to follow as well. Kind of looking on, I'm not to say that, things can't change, but at least through 4 games, that's an interesting conversation as well. And health as well. And Denver has had a couple of key injuries as well. Aaron Gordon's not 100%. Peyton Watson's not playing. You mentioned what, Detroit and Orlando. I honestly, what I thought, and I told you this, I think over text, I thought Charlotte was going to beat Orlando, and I thought Charlotte was going to beat Detroit.
I don't know about Detroit, but I
thought Charlotte was going to beat Detroit,
Yeah.
but I didn't think Orlando was going to beat Charlotte, and I didn't think Orlando could beat Detroit.
Right.
But at least now, and I mean, look, Detroit can still win the series, just like Denver can still win the series. But yeah, at least early returns right now, maybe not the greatest, but it's still early. I'm hoping Toronto can hang on here and even this series up. Atlanta, New York's been a really good series.
It has, yeah.
That Houston and Lakers game 3 at the end of that game, I mean, that was one in a 500 playoff game sort of thing where they had that game, Houston, and they fucking, I mean, it's just everything that could have went wrong in the last 15 seconds. Of regulation, everything that could have went wrong, and they went from being up 6 to losing in overtime. And the other series we're forgetting, San Antonio and Portland. I mean, listen, Wemby,
Dylan Harper, man.
Listen, man, that's bullshit. We could have a whole separate episode about Dylan Harper being on the Spurs. I mean, I still can't believe that shit, man. But yeah, look, even if Wemby doesn't play, if he does play, it doesn't matter. They win the series regardless. And then, San Antonio against either Memphis or Denver will be a spectacular series.
Yeah.
You mentioned you went to the OKC game, which I honestly would love to hear more about, and just kind of the atmosphere in Oklahoma and being there. And we could talk about Oklahoma. But as far as the Thunder specifically, yeah, man, they're really good. And the scary part is they'll probably be even better in a couple of years. And they still have the most draft picks in the NBA in the next X amount of years. So, yeah, man, that's a cheat code of a thing where it's like, even if they don't win it this year, they've got all these draft picks. They can do whatever the hell they want. And they have a lot of players that are only going to get better too. Outside of, you mentioned SGA, like a lot of those guys are only going to get better too. And I love AJ Mitchell too. Santa Barbara guy, UC Santa Barbara, Big West. I still can't believe he ended up on the Thunder in the second round. That was crazy. He's been a baller for a long time. And it's good to see him finally, get the start in the playoffs now with Jalen Williams out, and put up 20 shots in a playoff game. I love that. But any other series we're forgetting here? Boston and
Philly, man. Philly's playing them tough, dude.
Yeah,
give them credit.
Listen, you mentioned Dylan Harper. Listen, I still think it's bullshit that those two guys in those two places. But at the same time, not that it's bullshit, but I mean, those two guys are great players. And not only, I mean, the sky's the limit for both. Tyrese Maxey's incredible.
Yeah.
I wish Embiid was healthy.
I know.
I really do.
But
it's just how things go.
Yeah.
Well, it's just how it goes, man. But listen, Philly's playing them tough. We'll see. I think they're playing later today. Game 4. That'll be an interesting game. Philly has to win this one. If they lose this one, it's done.
Right.
But even if Philly doesn't win the series, I still think Philly long term with Maxey and Edgecombe playing together, and I think
get rid of Paul George's contract and go after somebody else. Create a
that was that was an obvious mistake at the time,
right.
And we could talk about that. But they could have taken that money and they could have aggregated it somewhere else. But
and they will,
yeah, they'll get off of it. Hey, look, getting VJ Edgecombe makes that a lot easier to swallow.
Exactly.
And they got some other good players on that team too. So a lot of things stand out. I mean, we could be here for hours talking about it, but just kind of early returns, I'd say, without going too. I mean, because again, we could be here till fucking I mean, it's what is it right now? 12:18, could be here till 7 p.m. probably, but off the top of my head, I would say that's kind of what stood out. So we're gonna anything you want to add real quick before we transition here? Or?
Yeah, before we pivot, I'm just extremely disappointed and sad about KD.
Oh yeah,
this is a terrible look for him. And I don't care that he missed game 1 and game 3. I think it's odd that he missed game 3. I don't know why. I mean,
I think it was a separate injury.
So okay, I mean, interesting. I mean, you know what?
I don't know,
it's
man.
The playoffs.
It's
everybody's hurt, right? Everybody's banged up. So
it's tough, man.
I'm very, very surprised.
And you know what's interesting is this was probably the most he's played in the regular season in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's just one of those things. Like, I think, I would have said the same thing when they made the trade. Is he going to be healthy? And I think the tough pill probably for him and for the Rockets and for everybody in that respect is like, for him to pick up the initial injury in practice before game 1. I guess he bumped knees in practice, and then I guess in game 2 he picked up a new injury and sat out game 3. And I think the really bad look though, man, like something that we haven't talked about on here. Kind of touched on it with Vince the other day, but only briefly. Like, I know KD's a great talent and a great scorer and a great player, but I just think as far as like the fit of it, I think it just kind of accelerated Houston's timeline in a way that I think those young players needed a little bit more time anyways. And I think, it's going to be, that they choked and they're playing terribly but these are good young players. Like, they'll bounce back from it. But yeah, I just think the chemistry is a little off.
Yeah, you could tell.
Like they asked Ahmed Thompson earlier. I actually read this before, before we met up, and they asked him, like, how's KD doing? And he's like, honestly, I don't know.
And then Jabari Smith was also talking about a little bit.
And then Jabari Smith
KD needs to just be KD or something.
And then you can tell, like, in games 1 and 2, especially in game 2, you could tell that Şengün was in his head the whole time. He wasn't, like, in game 3 when KD was out. Like, if Houston doesn't blow that game, the conversations about how Şengün in the fourth quarter was a fucking monster, man.
Right, and then he hit the side of the backboard for that to send it to overtime.
But that's what I'm saying. If they don't blow it, we're having a different conversation. That's what I'm saying. It's funny how these things work. Like, in an alternate universe, that's the conversation we're having, right?
Yeah.
That's just how things go. Like, this is sometimes how the cookie crumbles. And so I think sometimes within the narrative, you kind of lose sight of the context of it. But yeah, you mentioned KD. It's tough, man. But yeah, they lost game 2 with him too. And he took like, what was it, 1 shot in the second half or something like that. We'll see how game 4 goes. I think it would be really devastating for Houston to get swept.
I mean, even swept or losing in 5. I mean, it's the same thing because, you have the Lakers playing without Luka and Reeves, bro. Like,
I don't know, man. It's one of those things where it doesn't surprise me all too much, but it's not an indictment on the Rockets. Like, I just think
no, it is, bro. You cannot get swept or lose in 5 to a Lakers team without Luka.
No, what I'm saying is there's just not that. I'm saying the team just doesn't. It's not there. You know what I mean?
All right, and that's on Udoka, and that's on the.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, I think the team itself was not ready for this, and they've played down to their competition all season, and I think we're creatures. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not an indictment on. It's an indictment on the 82 game regular season that they had, even when KD was healthy, and those same habits that they built then are translating now. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, we're on the same page in that respect, but I guess I phrased it wrong. It's like it's not an indictment on the players as far as like. Like Şengün's like 23, Jabari Smith's like 22, Ahmed Thompson's like 22, 23, Shepherd, they're all young players. Like, they'll all get better. But, Tari Eason's a good player too. But all season, the same problems that they've had all season are magnified now. and it's magnified worse because they're losing to the Lakers that don't have Luka and Austin Reeves. But I think, ironically, what I'm trying to get at is I think if Luka and Austin Reeves were both playing, or one of them was playing in this series, I think Houston would be playing better. And that, I think, is the indictment on the Rockets. And I think that goes also to, Ime Udoka and coaching and whatnot. And that was my concern when they hired him too, was I looked at it even when they had Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks. And obviously, look, Van Fleet being out hurts them a lot too. But yeah, I think they'll bounce back. I think they shouldn't overreact to this, even if they lose. I think they have to make a couple of adjustments. Certainly, they can't shoot worth a lick of damn. But, they were I think they had like the best offensive rebounding season, like the history of the NBA. Also, Steven Adams being out has hurt them a lot too. So I think, if they come back next year, Van Fleet comes back, Steven Adams comes back, make a couple moves around the margins, and they don't give up on the young players that they've got, I think we could be having a different conversation in a year. But my fear is that they'll overreact to this.
They will, yeah.
And they'll fuck the thing up.
Because with KD at 37, and they gave him that extension.
Yeah, and that's my fear.
Yeah.
My fear, because then that was my fear at the time, was that adding Kevin Durant accelerated a timeline that I don't think they were ready for. And that was that's kind of like the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's a fascinating conversation. And either way, there's a reason they're getting mocked all over the place, because it's bad. It's a bad look being down 3-0, and the way they blew game 3, especially. But I think it's not super surprising to me, because they've been doing this all season. Like that. Listen, when you lose to the Sacramento Kings twice and once, and then Ime Udoka says like we shouldn't be losing, I don't know. I just think there's something's not clicking there. Anyways, so we're gonna pivot from basketball, and I'd like to get your thoughts on your beloved Chelsea. A couple of big things have transpired from last week until now, when we last talked about Chelsea. So I kind of just want to take your temperature on that, see where your thoughts are.
Yeah, shaking my head in disgust. It went from bad to worse very, very quickly. Obviously, last weekend I hopped on, and I was pretty bullish. I was like, hey, this is a get right game. United with their depleted back line, and when I went over the lineup, I didn't see Joao Pedro. I literally said, on air, that kind of hurts my confidence a little bit, but there should be no reasoning for them to not get it done at home. And United have one shot on target, and that's all they needed to win.
Yeah,
that's it. They had one shot on target. So then you're like, okay, and then to get embarrassed against a Brighton team, at the Amex Stadium, 3-0. It was just, and the stuff that the away crowd was chanting at Rosenior, and then the Brighton fans saying, we love you, Rosenior, right? Because he played at Brighton for a little bit. So, that banter back and forth was just a terrible look. And they couldn't keep the guy on, bro, anymore. I mean, you're talking about 4 straight games without a goal, and you touched on it in your other recording with Vance. That's the worst run they've had since 1912. Players lost respect for him. I remember sending a couple of screenshots, of what Rosenior said and what Trevor Chalobah said after the game. Rosenior called out the players, and Chalobah said that this is, it's not about effort. Everybody tried. The guys tried their ass off, and it's not about effort. We're all tired. We all did what we were supposed to do. Apparently, I didn't watch the game because I was out on a business trip, but they played against a Brighton side. That's a back 5 with Pedro Neto and Liam Delap up top. That is unheard of. That is extremely, I don't know what type. You're playing a back 5 against Brighton. Like, are you, fill me in there, Liam. But you know what? And they had to do it. They had to do it. I'm glad they did it. And it's just the circus continues, bro. If we if we had the opportunity, we could be on here for. I could talk about Chelsea forever and ever about their miscomings, and I came on here, had to eat crow about my prediction that they would beat United, which is terrible. And they're probably not going to get Champions League. I don't care if they get Europa League or Conference League. I don't care about either of them. And we'll see. It'll be an interesting summer, whether or not players, want to leave because of the lack of Champions League. They're 10 points behind the fifth slot, which is Villa. Villa and Liverpool both have 58 points. Chelsea's at 48 with 4 more Premier League games to go. And cool. They beat Leeds in the semis. Enzo scored a great header, and they'll play Man City, and it's a final at Wembley. Cool. But we'll see how things look against City after they beat us 3-0. So at the Bridge. But I'm just not happy about anything right now, and the manager that I would like to have is Cesc Fabregas. He's well respected, has done wonders developing Nico Paz. Nico's definitely going back to Madrid, by the way. That goes without saying. They have other really good young players that he's developed and everything, and he's won it in Spain. He's won it in England. He's won international trophies. He knows what it takes. He's definitely well respected, and we'll see. I think they're going to take their time, and once the World Cup ends, they'll see who's available and everything. I'm sure they'll start off with contacting various agents of managers and putting out feelers. But it's and by the way, if they don't get Champions League, their PSR is going to come swinging, because they reported $1 billion loss.
Wow.
So,
so they need Champions League.
Yeah. They need it, and then they're gonna have to sell players. I already saw that. Obviously, Munich is not going to renew, or not going to trigger the clause of 65M for Nico Jackson, so they're going to sell him. We'll see what Enzo Fernandez wants to do. Again, it was a slap in the face to suspend him 2 games for, saying something that wasn't that big of a deal. I talked about that last week, and we'll see. It's just it's not fun right now at all. But kudos to them. They beat Leeds, and they're going to play for a final. So.
All right. Well, we'll see how things go in the interim, and who they end up hiring. I think Fabregas would definitely be a nice hire. I'm not sure who the other rumored candidates are at the moment. I'm sure there are a couple of names being thrown around already. Perhaps you could touch on other possibilities as well outside of Fabregas, but you mentioned it. They need that Champions League spot, and big Liam. We hardly knew you. It was a fleeting thing. So any last things you want to touch on Chelsea, or maybe just any just soccer thoughts at large?
Part of me doesn't want Chelsea to qualify for any Europe, so these idiots in the front office can learn. But then another part of me says, a lot of players are going to want to leave as a result of that. So, it just completely mixed feelings, because if they don't qualify for any Europe, and even, something less than Champions League, they got to look in the mirror. And apparently, when they released their statement that Liam Senior is fired, that they're going to reevaluate things and really take a different approach. Like, okay, let's see it. Actions speak louder than words type of sentiment from me. And it's just it's different, because my generation, guys in their 20s we grew up watching Chelsea be successful and be competitive. Obviously, before Roman came in, they were not, right? And um, we're not saying to win, every single year, but we're saying to compete and be a club that everybody respects and not be a laughing stock. And I mean, how many times have I hopped on here, bro, and have just completely come in here disappointed, trashing ownership, trashing, the former managers that have been hired. And like I said, when I mean, this was like maybe 3 years ago when I think it was either Potter got fired or, they finished the season in 12th place. And, I spoke like 45 minutes, bro. I couldn't stop talking about the disappointment, and here I am, still doing the same thing, singing the same song. So
Well, I hope for your sake that it turns around and this next managerial hire that they make will be the right one, and they'll get back on the right footing and right direction. Look, I don't think they're totally far off, but it's obvious, like you said, that some changes need to be made, and
yeah, maybe don't have 5 sporting directors. How about that?
too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
Let's start there. I think that can be something to talk about. And beyond that, I want to talk about how Tottenham celebrated their first win of 2026 as if they won the damn league and they didn't gain any ground in their battle for relegation. I mean, talk about a club with such low standards to celebrate like that and beating Wolves, mind you, 1-0. I mean, how. I mean, they were never even mighty to begin with, but I mean, this is a new low for them. And again, I'm going to save everything for when the relegation does happen. And you know what? I've had a season where Chelsea finished 10th when they fired Mourinho and brought in Gus Hiddink as an interim before Antonio Conte came in, and everybody was trashing Chelsea. I had the year when they finished 12th, and everybody was trashing Chelsea. So I ain't going to apologize for nothing. And when it does happen, get ready, bro, because there's a lot to dissect and talk about with how things have gone over there. And you know what? That's not getting nearly as much spotlight as Chelsea. And this is why, though. It's because Chelsea's a successful club. They are. Tottenham has never been a successful club. And this is a new low for them. So let's see what happens, dude. Let's see what happens. They have a tough run to end the year. And I would love it. I would love it. And I'm already even speaking too much on it. But that's that there. Obviously, before we hopped on last week, I talked about Arsenal City. City did get the win. And now it's just going to be about goal differential at this point. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. William Saliba, who's one of my favorite center backs, he talked about the other day that he's been with the club for 4 years and they have finished second every single time. So like if they don't get it done this year, like the disappointment from everyone is going to be insane because they've had the window for such a long time, and to end up falling short every time is just so disappointing. And one thing I do want to talk about was Arteta's decision to not start their 70 million striker Victor Gyökeres for arguably the biggest game of their season and start Kai Havertz in place. And he did the same against Newcastle the other yesterday. Obviously, Kai got injured and he was forced to sub out. But what kind of message is that? You beg the board to sign a striker. They do. They pay the price point that Sporting want, and you don't even play him. You're not using him to his strengths. I mean, how can people have your backing in signing players if you're not gonna start them against for the biggest game of your season? And if they end up bottling it, I know you sent a hella funny meme. I have that saved in the camera roll in case
For a
that does
thumbnail.
happen. Yeah. I'll send it to my fellow Gooners around the world. But yeah, I think again, it's a wait and see. So we'll when the season is all dusted, we'll hop on and we can talk about everything from start to finish for sure.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that for sure. We're going to transition now. Real quick before we do transition, I do want to say, since we got this Cleveland Toronto game on, Cleveland just hit a big three to go up by 5.
You got
Brandon
BI
Ingram just
gets
got
stuff out.
fouled for 3 free throws. I just want to say real quick, I want to say Colin Murray Boyles on the Raptors, the rookies, absolutely fantastic basketball player. I just want to throw that in there. I just had that on. Just had number 12 on the Raptors. Yeah,
There you go.
Colin Murray Boyles, man, fantastic player. Anyways, so we're going to transition now. I kind of want to get your thoughts on the NFL draft. You had mentioned you kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that, which sets the stage for our
for the finale.
Yeah.
it.
So on that NFL theme, if you will. So just real quick, I just kind of want to see. I know you mentioned round 1 specifically, so just kind of want to see what stood out to you and just about the draft.
Yeah. First of all, before I dive in, NFL draft is not necessarily my wheelhouse. So here in this segment, definitely going to look to Ryan, and I listened to your recording of you and the guys talking about just getting live reactions on every pick and all that, which was a great recording. Enjoyed every second of it. But I think overall, what the Jets did, I think was great. Both New York teams, obviously, was fascinating for sure. Rams going with Ty Simpson, and the fact that the Niners don't have to worry about their first round pick for a while is certainly cool. And I don't know if you saw. The local Bay Area media asked John Lynch about what his thoughts were about that. And, he kind of smiled, smirked, looked at the ground and was like, he's a good football player.
Natural reaction.
Yeah. So I thought that was super funny. I want to touch on Arizona, bro. If Arizona here, if they, do what they're supposed to do, and when I say that is tank as best they can, and they get a quarterback for the future, bro. That quarterback steps into an offense that's going to have Jeremiah Love, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, like, and I think they also, they did get an offensive lineman as well in the second round to help out with the running game for sure. So. Look out. I'm seeing what they're doing. I see what they're doing. Obviously, they hired the younger LaFleur. So this year is probably what they're going to try and do for sure. Didn't they draft Carson back?
Yeah,
they did. They drafted Carson. It's just probably a flyer pick, if anything. I mean,
like you said.
You could tell what they're doing.
I think they're angling to be the worst team in the league this year.
Right.
One of the worst. But that's not a bad thing in this scenario for them.
Right.
It doesn't even have to be the worst team in the league. But bottom 2, bottom 3. But like you said, there are a couple of foundational pieces. They're like I won't be surprised if they're like, if I had to put money on it right now, I would say they're going to be the worst team in football next year, potentially. But that's an interesting shout.
I mean, division rival for me. They're not even really a rival, but somebody in the division. So
all right, so Arizona stood out to you. That's interesting.
Yeah. Because they could have gone offensive tap, but I like what they did. They took the best player on the board, and they're looking, long, not an immediate, piece or something. They took the best guy on the board. So I thought that was. That was a good move on them. Anything else really? I mean, you know what? the Niners trading back twice in the first round. And then, I mean, they traded back 3 different times, bro. And again, I'm not, we're no GMs here. And what I do know is I would have liked for them to not get a running back in the 3rd round.
We are GMs, by the way. You could be a general manager. You're gonna save the Giants. Save the Giants.
You know it. You know
save
it.
the Giants.
But I don't see the need to draft a running back in the 3rd round. Yeah, okay, McCaffrey's old, but there's other positions of need for the immediate future that you need now. That was gonna be nasty if he made it in. The receiver that they got out of Ole Miss, I don't know enough about him. I personally would have loved Denzel Boston. He was still there. But you know what? Maybe with John Lynch and the Niners, they evaluated. To be completely honest here, bro, in terms of his draft picks, what's saving him is him getting George Kittle, Fred Warner, and Upton Stout. And obviously, I'm not mentioning Nick Bosa because that was an obvious pick. That was as obvious as it could get, at that year. So, but those 3 draft picks is genuinely saving him, and he has not had that success of drafting first-round players. Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster, Javon Kinlaw, Mike McGlinchey. Jerry's still out on Michael Williams, of course. So maybe they knew what they're good at, and they were like, all right, let's do this. But I think it was interesting they drafted that defensive tackle out of Oklahoma because, dude, they spent a 2nd-round draft pick last year for Alfred Collins, who I really like, by the way. I really like him. They traded for Odighizuwa from Dallas. So you already had 2 guys right there on your depth chart. So I don't understand why they drafted that D tackle out of OU. And then they finally did draft a couple of offensive linemen with their last picks in the 5th round. So, I mean, we'll see what materializes, but I was a bit disappointed for sure. I would have liked them to do other things, but again, they're in the office. Their scouts are doing, are running all sorts of models and everything. And, we'll see what happens, but we have not heard any word from Raheem Morris as to what type of scheme he wants to run. I know that he's a 3-4 guy, right? Or is he a 4-3?
I think you got it.
3-4, right? So there's some guys that right now on the depth chart that might not necessarily fit that. So they wanted to get a piece for him, and it's like, okay, they already did with, again, Odighizuwa. So I just, that one was a little puzzling to me. And I heard that Indiana running back, bro, he's not a pass catching back. And, Kyle, I think you know your system better than everybody else. You do like your running backs to have that ability.
I like the pick.
maybe
the pick. Caleb
maybe they
think
they can coach him up on that.
He's a good player.
So,
I like the pick, honestly. It's a good pick.
Shout out to the Raiders. I know you were talking about some of the nice draft picks that they made. And I want to see them be somewhat competitive for our boy, of course. And the Rams also did an interesting pick with a tight end I heard out of Ohio State, was it? So that's pretty much all I have for the draft on my end. But I definitely want to ask you your opinion on the idea and the strategy of what the Niners did, and if there was anything else.
So I'll tell you what. I'll tell you about the Niners, or what I thought about the Niners, and then I'll save I'll save it. We'll do it a separate time. We'll do a 7-round recap. Just kind of all the teams. We'll go through, some of the teams that, I thought had pretty good drafts and whatnot. Because that'll be, but just as far as the Niners specifically, You mentioned the first pick. They traded down a couple of times, so their first pick was the first pick of the second round. They took Deshaun Stribling out of Ole Miss. Played a couple of years at Oklahoma State prior to that. It was played a good 4 or 5 years in college. He's got the experience. A couple years in the SEC. A couple years in the Big 12. Productive player. You know what? That's kind of they've done that the last couple of years. I feel like they tend to take receivers and running backs day two, and they don't hit on all of them, but they hit on a decent amount. And I think that's the best strategy. That's what the best organizations do: is you take as many of them as you can, and they might not all hit, but they have a type clearly. And look, I think Stribling's look. That's the guy that I like him. I was a little surprised to see him go that hot, but it's one of those things when it happens, it's like, you know what? I like the pick. The guy they got out of Texas Tech, Romello Height on the D line, David Bailey gets a lot of love, but Romello Height, Lee Hunter too went to the Panthers. Like all those guys, it was a really good defensive line in general at Texas Tech. So I like that pick a lot. Romello Height for them, and then you mentioned the running back out of Indiana, Kalen Black. I think he's a really nice back as well, and I mean he's a tough running back, and he's just big physical runner. Kind of adds a different dimension to their run game, and Shanahan, that system. You and I could probably go back there, play running back, and maybe get a couple of yards of carry. Like I mean, at least me, I'll probably die after one tackle, but I might get a couple of yards before I get killed. So. I think they had a solid draft. I mean, it was the greatest draft I've ever seen in my entire life. No, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, but I think what they did wasn't totally atypical. It was up to par with what they've done in the past, and I would say those three players that they took on day two, Stribling, Romello Height, Kalen Black, those three guys, I think all three of them can contribute for them. I think DeJuan Stribling honestly kind of can step in right away and contribute for them. And then, obviously they still got McCaffrey, but you can never have too many running backs in the NFL. Especially something that's been a big topic of conversation for them has been, maybe lightening the workload on McCaffrey a little bit. Mm-hmm. Obviously easier said than done because he's just so good. But yeah, I think there were definitely a lot of teams whose drafts in a 7-round scope definitely stood out to me, and that can be a whole shepherd spiel. So we'll what's the word I'm looking for? Table that. I was going to say taper, and that's not the right word. But before we get into the big popcorn grand finale here, just want to make note that the Raptors up by 3, 6.3 seconds to go. RJ Barrett just missed the front end of 2 free throws. But assuming he makes this one to go up by 4, Cleveland's got 1 timeout left. So Toronto, not out of the woods yet, but RJ Barrett makes a second free throw. They go up by 4 points. Cleveland just calls timeout. So that's what's going on in there. But now I'm going to set the stage for you for the big topic that I know you wanted to talk about. I still have no idea what you want to, where this is going to go. So I'm excited because it's a blank canvas in many ways. So I'm going to set the stage, man. I'm going to leave it to you, and you can kind of draw on it as you wish.
Well, it's a good thing that we held out for a week because, since then there's been some new developments from the story. First things first, what I'm, about to talk about is my thought and my opinion on it. I understand that it's a controversial topic, and you don't have to agree with what I say, but this is my thought and viewpoint about it. And again, I understand the sensitivity here, and I'm completely respectful of all of that. At first, when I was talking to you about, hey, like this is something that needs to be talked about, that's because, dude, when those pictures at a Sedona retreat were posted online, not a single major news outlet, media outlet was talking about it apart from PFT with Mike Florio, and I was sitting there and I was like, why is nobody talking about this? You know, I was like, what's going on? And, is Kraft paying people off? Is the Athletic paying? Like what? Why is nobody just except for Mike Florio, which was super odd in my opinion because we'll talk about the other thing that popped up in Boston as well. That was instantly, that was covered across, all media outlets right when the story got out and everything. And this one, it took some time to discuss it or for people to cover it. And maybe that's because, there was ongoing investigation or whatever. Who knows? I don't know. But, I think, a lot of listeners know what's going on here. Seeing holding hands and hugging at some kind of retreat and, sitting, poolside and all that. And this, and it was, at first Vrabel said it's a completely, innocent interaction between two people. And Diana Rossini comes out swinging that, this is missing six other people that were also there. And, they both had the same story at the time that this was completely innocent and there's nothing to talk about here. And the Athletic comes out and unequivocally supports Diana and says the same thing. And then all of a sudden, they come back and retract what they said and decided that they're going to investigate what happened. And after that, no way. After that, Diana Orsini just resigns, and what she says in her resignation letter was, "I don't want to give this any more oxygen because there's nothing to talk about." And you're sitting there and you're saying, "Okay, I mean, you can still be employed and you can still have a leave of absence, but that doesn't mean that you resign. You yourself resigning means, that maybe her employer said, hey, if you don't want us to look into this any further, you should resign." Or I'm sure that she hired an attorney and everything, and probably that was the legal advice to get, was if you want this to go down as quiet as possible, just resign. But anyway, she resigned, and remember, it took Vrabel 2 weeks to speak about it, and I think it took 2 weeks because he met with Big Bob Kraft to see what type of angle that they want to approach, and they did the wait and see game, and you know what? Vrabel threw Diana completely under the bus when he went out to the media and said, I spoke to the players, I spoke to the team, I spoke to my family, and I need to be a better decision maker and everything. And you don't say that if something if there is nothing out of this story here. You don't come out to the media and say that. And again, I think the Patriots were very strategic in how that they wanted to approach this. And I think Bob Kraft just said, "You know what, dude, I don't care. Throw her under the bus and just make a statement and go be away from the team a little bit before OTAs, and this will all settle." You know what I mean? I that's definitely 1,000% the approach that he took. And then after that, obviously there's talk about him seeking counseling on day 3 of the draft. And apparently the reports just came out that Vrabel was still in contact with the team despite this. So I don't know what Bob Kraft is going ways about this. And there's now what I am going to get into and discuss are reports that I've seen. So first, let's talk about the fact that people are calling for Vrabel to get fired because Rossini resigned. And it's the same deal with Ime Udoka and that Celtics travel lady. They both got fired by the Celtics, and the expectation is that Robert Kraft is going to do the same. Let's talk about this first. Um, Vrabel and Rossini are under different umbrellas, and what I mean by different umbrellas is their employers are different. Diana Rossini was employed by The Athletic, who are owned by the New York Times. Mike Vrabel is an employee of a private organization, private league, New England and the NFL. And um, the NFL came out on Thursday, or Goodell came out on Thursday and said that the NFL doesn't have to look into this because this is a team matter. So then not only does it go down from the organization, it's not the organization's responsibility, it's the team's responsibility. And obviously, I think a lot of people know that Kraft had a massage scandal that instantly went under the rug, and um, Vrabel just took him to the Super Bowl. So you really think a guy like Rob Kraft is going to, fire the coach of the year for, no, he's not. He's not going to do that. And again, it's because this is under different employers. You're talking about a journalist, and journalism is all about what? It's about integrity and acting in an ethical manner. I mean, you know what? Even everything in life, it's about integrity and acting in an ethical manner. And I know that there's a lot of people saying like, we shouldn't be too quick to judge this or judge that. I mean, guess what, dude? You know what? If there's one big takeaway that I can speak on this, it's this: is every individual's word and reputation has volumes. What do I mean by that? Um, I think you've all seen the clips of uh, Diana talking about how she wants to be addressed as MILF on live TV on ESPN. This is a mother with children talking about how she wants to be addressed as a MILF. Okay, I don't know if you were trying to be funny with that, but I don't think a lot of people took that as something that's funny. Um, that's one thing. Second thing, she's on some kind of podcast or something, and she was like, I had too much fun in Miami. Like, I did things that my husband wouldn't approve, and I'm like, really? Okay. Third thing, if my husband's average, if I was, I would be posting a lot more about my husband if he wasn't average. Like, are you serious right now? So that's the precedent there that sets things up when these photos of them in a Sedona retreat are leaked. It's those three things right there. So, and naturally, people are gonna, come up with their own thought and conclusion. So, you know, what kind of reputation and message are you sending for yourself when, those are, and there's other things, by the way, that are just a little too much for me to get into and discuss. But those are the big three things that really really stick out to me. So, what do you think people are going to assume about you if that's the type of stage you want to set yourself up as a journalist? And then these are the other things that I didn't even talk about yet. Um, in 2020, they were at some bar in New York, and they're all handsy, pecking on each other, macking on each other. And this is when Diana was engaged, and I think Vrabel was already married at that point. And those photos are leaked now in an era of AI. Is it real or not? I mean, I think everybody has verified that those are real. So it's not a matter of a hit piece or anything like that. Apparently, they were also at a casino together. What was it, in Mississippi or something in 2024? So um, it's just a lot. And again, the big takeaway for me is your word, your reputation, and who you are as an individual is so important. And I should Vrabel get something. That's not up for me to decide. I'm not an employer of NFL or anything like that. I'm sure his family is not going to look at him the same way, and that's a very damaging thing in and of itself. Apparently, Diana's um, husband hired a PI, and that's where those photos of them in the Sedona retreat got leaked. PI took those photos and maybe sent it to him, and then he sent it to news outlets and posted it because, dude, like, how much slander can one take as a man, right? When your wife is going on live television saying those three things that I already talked about, and it's just this world of sports journalism is as a whole is just going down a. We're seeing a lot more things happen. Whether it's Joy Taylor, whether it's the incident with Udoka, and now this one. And there's a USA Today reporter. I'm pulling up the post exactly so I don't butcher this. A USA Today reporter tweeted after she resigned. Her name is Chrissy Freud, and I quote, "I'm sure you were told to submit this or you'd get fired instead. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. We know who you really are and what you've been up to for years. It does so much detriment to women in sports who have done things the right way." USA Today fired her for that. What's wrong with having an opinion? And the key thing that I want to talk about is it does so much detriment to women in sports who have done things the right way. So, all in all, it's safe to say that her career as a journalist is over. I think more and more stuff will probably get released, and she's going to be in hiding for a bit. Now, I emphasize the word journalist because there's other ways now to be involved with media. What we do here, we're podcasting and you put it up on various platforms. So, she can probably do that. And maybe, when the dust settles, maybe she'll have the courage to really explain what's been going on. I doubt it. Again, she's taken legal advice and everything. And again, I feel for people who do things the right way. And that's why I wanted to talk about that tweet from a US. I didn't even know who she is, to be honest, until I saw that. So, and she got fired for just having an opinion about it. So, I think, again, when the regular season and even training camp and everything starts, it'll be swept under the rug. That's what Kraft wants to do. Kraft even, I think, tried to urge and plead with media outlets to not report this. And I want to, say thank you to those the higher ups or the decision makers who didn't listen, because this is big, dude. And it leads to the question, like, what are other insiders doing to get these type of information? Like that's the big thing here. And I'm talking about your Ian Rappaports. I'm talking about your Schefters. And I'm not saying, like it's that type of, I'm not at all, but it does beg to ask the question, what, the relationships formed with these people to get, the late breaking news to tweet and to get that recognition of, oh, like he's an insider, you know what I mean? He knows it all, so it's just a terrible story across the board, and the who I feel for the most are both families. I feel for this woman's children. She has two sons, and I feel for Vrabel's children, who I think has a couple kids. I forget exactly. When your parents are celebrities, I can only imagine, like when any story gets published or talked about and stuff like that, like the type of attention it brings on them, and they're just trying to live normal lives. And that's something that they're gonna have to grow up with. So that's all I got here. That's all I got. Again, and what I when I say all of this, it's my opinion. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. Um, and I am being as level-headed and equally approached as I humanely can be. So
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Mic drop. I got nothing to add to that. I'll let that speak for itself. Um, it's been a pleasure, man.
likewise,
It's
likewise,
been a
and
pleasure, man.
first and last time that's talked about. Even then, like I think you've seen me here. Obviously, I'm sitting next to you. I don't like to talk about these type of things, but
I get you.
it's in the world of sports, and
Yeah, I
um,
get you. I
I thought
I get you, man. I
I thought
think
why not? So
Yeah, I think for me, I would, obviously I'll let it speak for itself. I think, in my humble worldview, without you know detracting from what you said, I think all I would add is I think this particular situation is its own separate thing. But I think out of what you said that I'll take away from it, and I would like to continue more of is like you said a lot of good things about like integrity and who you are as a person and how you come across and all that, and like, um, I think that in this particular case of Diane Rossini and Mike Vrabel, maybe I don't know as much about the situation or a lot of things that you said that honestly it's my first time hearing. Um, I think what stands out to me, what you said more so is just like, this situation notwithstanding, I think something that I'd like to do more on here is, obviously you and whoever else, like having those types of things, like where you said like a disclaimer, like, hey, you don't have to agree with me or not. These are my opinions. And, set that up for any context of anything. Right. Um, cause that's kind of what this is really supposed to be like, right? It's supposed to be a place where people can have differing opinions, right? And that's the whole point of this. Is we don't always have to agree with it. And sometimes when you hear something that you don't agree with, it further furthers your own beliefs. Because you hear something, you're like, oh no, that's not the right thing to do. That's not the right way to go about it, or whatever it may be. And then sometimes when you hear someone out, maybe there's a perspective you hadn't thought prior. And so I think it's important to just kind of open that space up for all people to talk about any topic, so that way nothing really becomes off limits, because yes, things get swept under the rug, and that's a whole thing that we could get into. Is like, that's why we come on here a lot, we talk about like propaganda and stuff, and it might sound like joking around and sarcasm and whatnot, but there's a deep rooted truth in that as well, is that a lot of the media that you consume, a lot of the articles you read, regardless of the industry, regardless of sports, um, you know sometimes you have to ask yourself, where is this information coming from? And that's kind of why I like to, I always like to, with the, like with the unfiltered report, right? Like, if you read it just as it is, you think it's just about not having a filter. But the big part of it that I like to emphasize is like the filter, because sometimes you have to filter through information. You can't just believe the first thing that you see or hear or read. You have to like, you have to really take the time to go into it. And then there's a separate culture you mentioned, like with the insiders and stuff. Like that whole thing has always been bizarre to me. Like, like the Shams Charanias, the Adam Schefters, like, look, I respect what they do and they put a lot of hours into it. Like, I remember there was an article I read about Shams Charania a long time ago where um, he's on his phone like 19 to 21
right,
hours a day.
I saw the same thing.
And in the story, he talks about how there was one time he was playing pickup basketball, and there was like a basketball story that broke, and he wasn't the one to break it because he was playing, and he was like, I'm never going to do that ever again. And like, so it's like this weird culture of like celebrating, like, like not sleeping, or like, like he's on vacation, so like not even really there, like, I respect the grind, I respect the hustle, but like, with the insider stuff specifically, like, we could have a whole spiel about like, like with the NBA draft. And, like last year, I watched the NBA draft. A lot of years I watched the NBA draft. And like last year was the first year I watched an NBA draft. And like there was no point in watching it. And I could have just fast forwarded through it because, they're out here spoiling the picks before they even come out and announce them. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And it's like this weird obsession that we've created of like being the first to report something, being the first to be, as opposed to like taking the time to let it marinate, gather all the facts and figures and then talk about it. Like we've created this thing where it's like, Woj who retired, and Woj basically, and I mean, that'll be a separate conversation. I could talk about this a different time as well, but like, so there are a lot of different angles that we could go about it and different opinions. Like, you mentioned the Mike Vrabel, Diana Rossini thing. Like there's no one did anything illegal. Nobody broke the law. It's not like it was like sexual harassment or worse than that. Like, from what it appears, it's two consenting adults. And it really, you mentioned it. I think, in my opinion, that's why I didn't really read much into it. Cause to me, it's almost, there are so many more important things in this world to report on and worry about than two people cheating on their partners. Like I get it's like an ethical, moral thing, but like there are deeper journalistic integrity sort of things that go beyond that. And so I think what you've done is open the floor to have like a branched out conversation of it, right? So I appreciate you taking the time to really open up and do that. Like you said, I know it's not something you want to do, typically and whatnot. But I appreciate you for opening up about that and sharing your perspectives on that and, doing all that because it allows other people to then become more comfortable to talk about similar or different things and say, hey, like, this is my opinion on that. And I think that's important because, in a world, you mentioned like Diane Rossini, like she could honestly come on here. I would love to have her on, like Mike Vrabel. Let's do it. Like, I believe that all people are not perfect. We make mistakes. We do things that we probably wish were not public, especially. And whatever the consequences of that, we all have to deal with, one of the things that always, I heard a long time ago that always kind of resonated with me is you can do anything in this world that you want as long as you can live with the consequences of it. And if you can't live with the consequences of it, you shouldn't do it. But yeah, I think, it's definitely, it opens the door for further conversations about not just this, but other topics and especially, and not even beyond sports, but just, in a world where a lot of the content that we read and we consume is owned and operated by the same people. Right. And that's kind of another thing that I've always wanted this to be as well as a place for like different perspectives because there's no agenda. Like we're not trying to like push anything. We're not trying to suppress anything either. So I appreciate you for taking the time to talk about that. And from your own, like you said, as objectively as you could, to really take the time to get into it and any other thing like that in the future, always you or anybody else, I would love to do that. So I appreciate you, man. Happy early birthday.
Thank you. Thank you again. Always a blast to be on here.
Always a pleasure, man. I know you got some big birthday plans coming up. So cheers to it, man. I'm looking forward to doing many more of these together as well. We got lots on the docket. You kind of hinted at a lot of it already earlier in our recording. It's always a pleasure, man. Much love.
Likewise.
Appreciate you, man. Well, this has been the Unfiltered Report. I'm Ryan. To my left, Malik. Happy early birthday, buddy. I hope people have their popcorn ready when they hear this. This is good stuff, man. All right. Until next time.